So the next thing that we're gonna do to get this thing ready to burn is talk about control lines, fuel treatment, and logistics. So TDF, we use dozers, and not like this in the picture per se, but so a lot of times we'll use dozers where applicable, depending on what the landowner wants. I know that a lot of private landowners don't have access to that equipment, or may have to do something different. Backpack blowers work great in the leaf litter. Hand tools, tractors. I mean, you can disc. There's a lot of different methods, but like Clint was saying, those control lines are what make or break your burn. So don't skimp on them. So a lot of times we can use natural barriers, creeks, rock outcroppings, or something like that. You want to make sure that along your control lines you're removing any heavy down debris or jackpot piles or slash piles or anything close to your fire breaks that could risk containment. Think about the topography and erosion when establishing control lines and what will happen when you burn fuels that might be holding soil or rocks in place, or when natural water features are present. So you don't want to burn up the creek banks or steep slopes down to soil, and then you got some erosion problems. Like I said, you can treat fuels prior to burning, mitigate intensity, or increase chances to achieve objectives. Herbicide sprays, hack and squirt, or removing ladder fuels are some examples. And ladder fuels are just, maybe vines or kudzu or something that's going to cause your little understory burn to go up in the canopy and I guess some torching or something like that out of it. Identify roads, escape routes, and safety zones in and around the unit. If you don't know what those are, and just study up on that a little bit and be thinking about if you and your friends are putting fire on the ground, you've got a good means of getting out of there if things get out of hand. And also, you've got good roads for logistics, right? To get supplies, you might need more fuel. You want to get in and out of there, right around the unit pretty quick, and do some monitoring. Uh, it's always good to have those trails and roads identified. Okay, so for our control lines on this unit, we use a dozer to establish control lines about 10 feet wide around the perimeter of the unit, and a plow line on one section that had short green grass on the other side, and it wasn't much of a risk in September of burning. There was an old power line right away, which you kind of see in the back there, that split the unit east to west. And we decided to use that because there was a food plot in there that was really green that he put in after the spray, and it gave and we cleaned it up, and it gave us an additional escape route and access to the middle of the unit. Like I said, for supply drops, fuel, etc. Fuel treatment. So several large brush piles were left by the logging crew near the unit boundaries that needed to be pushed interior and spread out to reduce risk of slop overs. Brush piles, guys, I mean, it's every time. If you got a brush pile near the edge of your line, you're just asking for problems. Honestly, I would, if you don't have means to like a dozer or spread it out, I would cut it off from the unit completely and burn it separately, and then just try to manage that during a scaled prescribed burn. Aerial spray was used on the unit to kill vegetation, which gave the opportunity for the growing season burn. Slash piles can retain a lot of moisture, especially in the summer with the humidity and usually more rain. Um, we spread those out way beforehand when you're in there doing your site prep, and help those dry out so they will burn and they won't be so intense and smoky. The logistics again, there were several UTV trails in this unit that we decided to maintain and put in the burn plan and map that everyone was made aware of. There were 2 safety zones identified, one for each side of the unit that we split in half, and several escape routes within that unit, based on how long it would take to get there, and topography and ignition plans. Radio communications are important if you're gonna do any kind of burning. I think that might be in the kit you need. There is definitely some kind of communications with anybody helping you burn on site. All right, so ignition, holding, and mop up. I will kind of make an individual plan for each of these and make it known to everybody that's going to be helping me burn. Creating each of these plans will determine the number of resources needed to carry out the burn. These numbers are the minimum needed once they are identified on your burn plan. Consider the sequence and pattern of ignition operation based on the prescription and site prep that you have established. Holding resources should be adequate to cover the fire breaks based on the ignition sequence, and have open communications with the ignition resources. Mop-up standards should be identified prior to the day of the burn and can vary greatly based on the unit. Let me swap back over and I'll show you that on our burn plan here. So mop-up standards are at the bottom here. For this one, we chose to set the standards at 1/2 chain within the unit, which is about 33 feet. So we're going to hit any hot spots and spread out any piles that are still burning in that 1/2 chain. And then we're going to keep people behind until the late evening, when the RHs increase, and come back the next day and monitor and continue mop up. And so here is our resources, the minimum that we chose for the burn, based on those ignition, holding, mop up standards. Couple dozers, an engine, 2 ignition crew, 4 holding crew with hand tools, and that's not including the 2 dozers. So we rolled a little heavy, obviously, with the agency. We have the ability to do that. Well, I also make sure I put a UTV in there to get around the burn pretty quickly. Yeah, we also put our communications radio frequencies in here in the plan here for communications. Let's go back. All right, let's get into specifics. So the ignition plan for this burn, ignition sequence and starting location for this unit was determined using the wind direction given in the parameters. So we knew we had winds, I think, coming out of the east on this one. And that was based on, like I said, those smoke sensitive receptors. So winds coming out of the east, we're going to do a backing fire here to start us off. The plan was to ring each unit individually. And other considerations for your ignition plan is topography, fuels. Like I said, this unit was fairly flat, and even fuel loading and type across the unit. Since we expected a hot burn here, given the prep to the unit and fuel loading, we determined that 1 or 2 igniters would be able to move quickly and cover plenty of ground. If you get into some more complex ignition sequences, and oftentimes you can get into maybe 3 or 4 igniters at the same time, depending on what you got going on. Ring technique was ideal, which would be accomplished 1 or 2 igniters given our unit layout. We added in the plan that an ATV mounted drip torch would aid in the ignitions, but was not necessary. That was just something that we had available and we did use, given our dozer lines and those UTV trails. We could get around pretty quick and put some fire on the ground here on this 90-acre unit. Holding plan. The holding plan was chosen based on the ignition plan, estimated fire behavior, and the fire breaks that we had installed. Always overestimate the holding resource needs. Consider fatigue, smoke, and experience when calculating your holding resource needs. It's the bigger the unit, especially if you're planning on burning it all in one operational period, one day, you don't have a huge window to burn that as far as time, and extra holding resources give you flexibility to really push those ignition crews further and faster. And you can have those holding crews doing mop up and monitor further back on your backing fire and on your fire breaks as you continue burning. So the more the merrier as far as holding crew goes. So we chose to have 2 dozers with operators, 4 holding crew members to cover this unit. This gave us the ability to spread out across the line and the option to rotate resources out of the smoke as needed. Inexperienced resources can often overlook or fail to identify potential control issues until it's too late. This is why I like to have extra eyes holding the line and make sure the right resource is in the right location. Keep in mind that a lot of people don't really know what they're looking for, or maybe they're just an extra body to be there, and you got to consider that when you're kind of putting your aces in their places. There's a swap over. Given the holding resources I have available, I have enough to pull 1 or 2 away to take care of a small spot, while I can still maintain control of the burn and continue ignitions, as long as it's still feasible to do so. All right, mop-up plan. The mop-up standards should be established before the burn and communicated. Often you can use your holding and ignition resources to complete mop-up. Mop-up is just as important and dangerous as the rest of the job and should not be taken lightly. Mop-up standards should factor in your fuel type and topography. Usually we'll kind of do mop-up on our backing fire, like where we start into the wind, kind of as we go. And then once we get into the flanking, as far as ringing it, in the flanking fire, we can start moving those resources around the unit. I talked about our mop-up standards. We also identified beforehand resources that could stay on site and monitor until relative humidity began to rise and temperatures decreased. These resources were also instructed to monitor smoke as it settled down in the cooler hours of the evening, particularly over roads and populated areas nearby. If needed, mop-up can continue the next morning when you return to the site. Smoke management planning. This is like I said, I'm not going to go real deep into all the tools and stuff you can do for smoke management. I'll tell you a few things here that I consider and that were specific to this burn. Visibility, health and safety, and smoke sensitive receptors. So smoke dispersion. The difference between good and bad smoke dispersion is dependent on several factors that can be planned for. When creating our prescription and looking for a burn window, we factor in all of these conditions. Relative humidity, dew point, LVORI, and inversion layers. They're definitely some of the main things we look at for a good burn day. If your RH is too high, you're going to have heavier smokes. Inversion layers low, your smoke's not going to lift out. Atmospheric stability and vent rate are important. So wet fuels or green fuels, that's something that if you get into a later winter burn or early spring burn, you're going to get a lot of smoke from those fuels starting to green up, and you need to consider that. For one, they're not safe to breathe. You keep in mind that for yourself, and then there's just going to put a lot of smoke downwind. Temperature drops overnight. We're going to drop that smoke in, down in the valleys, and weather fronts can also change smoke patterns and direction. Okay. Smoke can affect the crew, the public, livestock, wildlife health, and safety short and long term. When planning for smoke, you must identify and mitigate smoke impacts on anyone directly and indirectly involved in your burn. So the air quality index is something we look at. We do not burn if the air quality index is already high, as far as unhealthy. Green smoke or treated fuels, like I said, these treated fuels that we burn in they were pretty rough the next couple of days on the crew. I noticed some, a little swelling around the eyes and stuff like that you wouldn't normally see with having that herbicide treatment involved. Trash or fluids within the unit. A lot of times this is more geared toward wildfire, but sure, if there's something you overlooked, or maybe the logging crew rolled a tire or two in the unit and you didn't see it, or some oil or hydraulic fluid or something, you breathe that stuff in, it can be pretty bad. Long periods of smoke or particle exposure, there's plenty of studies on that. It's no good. So like I said earlier, make sure you got enough people you can rotate in and out of that smoke as you're burning your unit, and you're keeping in mind who else might be breathing it in down the road. Same for livestock and wildlife. They're very susceptible to smoke. Identifying smoke sensitive receptors. So smoke sensitive areas in the planning process is essential to managing smoke and developing a safe burn plan. Avoid and or mitigate burning upwind from populated areas, busy roads, schools, nursing homes, and agricultural values at risk. There's been many a times that we've turned down a burn just based on, we couldn't mitigate smoke, and maybe communities or those smoke sensitive receptors. Establish your parameters to avoid SSRs. Communicate to anyone that can possibly be affected by your smoke well in advance and let them know what you're doing. Weather changes can alter smoke production and direction and should be constantly evaluated during the burn. There's going to be little wind shifts here and there, but if something changes and your fire gets out of prescription, you need to reevaluate and maybe consider stopping where you are or changing up your tactics. Safety planning. Evaluate the hazards and risk involved in the burn and remove or mitigate it in the planning process. Big safety hazard here is this high voltage power line right next to the unit, and you see some guys there underneath it just hanging out. And you can see the way that our smoke and our wind is pushing the fire away from that, and that was definitely planned out. So post lookouts, people watching from a distance, they can see the smoke, they can see the fire, what's going on, and tell you what it's doing. Because when you're right there underneath, within your unit, you might be in the canopy, you can't see what your smoke's doing outside of that. It might be laying right down on your neighbor's house, and you don't know that. You're thinking it might be lifting up and out of there, but it's not. So as far as that, also your communication. So have a good communication plan as part of safety planning. Cell phones aren't the greatest communication plan when you're implementing prescribed burn. You want to have one, obviously, to call anybody that's not on site, but uh, I would suggest some two-way radios or something like that. Uh, Escape routes and safety zones. Make sure you always have a plan to get out of there if your fire breaks containment or something like that happens, and a safe place to go. Identify hazards within the unit, ponds, power lines, fences, etc. In the heat of the moment, it can be hard to get over a fence or under a fence, and you definitely don't want to walk right into a pond in a smoked-in area and not realize it. Discuss medical protocols and supplies. Medical trained personnel, evacuation of injured, communications during a medical emergency, and nearest hospital and contact info. I'll switch back over and look for that. So here we have some safety guidelines here. Some additional hazards I put were late summer, early fall. You got a higher than normal temperatures. You still got the ticks and snakes and other critters that you might not have in the late winter, early spring burn. And there were some inactive power poles within the unit that were potentially going to burn. Uh, and then down at the bottom here, we got identified nearest hospital and nearest burn unit, and the time it would take to get somebody out into those places. And that's just something you talk about in your briefing. Make sure everyone's aware before you start putting fire on the ground. All right, let's go contingency planning. Once you have evaluated risk, you can create contingency to help mitigate and prepare for unexpected events. This mainly focuses on escape from control lines. For this burn, we identify on-site and off-site contingency resources, including one engine with an operator on-site and one dozer with operator off-site. As a private landowner, you may just have the number for your local volunteer fire department there. Let them know what's going on, and of course, that might be your best option for a contingency resource. So you want to identify or create possible contingency control lines, including roads or natural barriers. Identify available contingency resource needs in your burn plan and determine when they should be requested. Once these contingency resources are in the plan, they must be available for the plan to maintain its viability. When to declare a wildfire, how to communicate it, and how to transition your operation and resources into a suppression status safely. So you definitely want to have a trigger point. If you have a little spot over, maybe a 5x5 or something, and you got a guy there on it quick and no big deal, they can break around it. It's all good and well, or whatever the case is. But what is the point to where you say, okay, this is out of control, too much to handle, and we need to either shut this burn down, call 911, call in additional resources, or whatever it is. Make sure everybody understands that, and make sure you let people know what's going on as that develops, because it certainly could. Make sure all resources on and off site are aware of all contingency plans and locations of escape routes and safety zones if the fire escapes control lines. See, let's go to back to the burn plan we wrote here, and let's look up our contingency. So here's this page on our burn plan for this unit, and on-site contingency resources were an engine with an E and an engine operator. That's what that second one is. And then off-site, one dozer and hand tools. And then there's just some kind of blanket contingency plans here. wildfire declaration down there, and then post declaration. So at the bottom, we kind of give how it's going to be communicated and how we're going to transition from a prescribed fire to a wildfire, and who will be the incident commander if that transition happens. So keep all that in mind, what you're going to do. You know, if it's just on private lands, you and your buddies or something, and you got to call 911. What are you going to do to take care of your buddies there, and do to help out 911 when they get there? All right. Notifications. So it's mandatory to let adjacent landowners know you will be burning according to state law. You should also identify local individuals and agencies that should be notified, aka TDF, prior to the burn. There are plenty of tools to use for this, and the more people that know ahead of time, the better. Uh, Notifying neighbors, community leaders, local government agencies, 911, state agencies, and anyone that may be affected by the burn. Phone calls, flyers, social media, and emails are good tools for notification. When notifying the public, provide a way for them to discuss with you and address any concerns or misconceptions about prescribed fire they might have. You want to be open to them and try to work with them if they do have some issues, and you can mitigate those as best you can. So your burn window, and this is going to be based on your prescription and the parameters you set and the objectives. There's several factors that can be controlled, but even more that are out of your control. Um, for TDF, for a lot of agencies, there's a big shortage of resources, and there's a lot that we are asked to try to burn each year. And you know, most agencies, I think, are well behind on their burns each year, just given the windows we have. So, some of the things to consider are weather. Are the parameters met? Is it safe to burn? What does smoke model show, and what are you seeing locally? Some weather tools, the prescribed burn planner, behave, fire weather forecast, spot weather forecast, rain gauges, kestrels or belt weather kits, and I put an asterisk by those spot weather and fire weather forecasts, because yes, you need to have those for your burn day, but they are rarely exactly accurate to the unit that I'm burning. So resources, share burn plan once complete, and start recruiting immediately. It's tough sometimes to get people to help you burn, and you can't plan months ahead for something like that. So it's like, hey, I see a window in 3 days. Can you help me? It's tough. Keep a roster of potential resources, of people that might help, and keep it current with their availability. Maybe ask them once a week, hey, you got time this week to help me if a window comes open. You can put those people down as available that week, and do that kind of weekly or bi-weekly or whatever it is, and get that commitment. Communicate often and with as much notice as possible of an upcoming burn window. And if you buy people lunch, sometimes they'll come back and help you again. Site prep, seasons change, and the site can change with it. Make sure the site remains prepped and visit often to inspect fuels and fire breaks so you don't miss a burn window. Uh, I've been back to a lot of units I thought was ready to go when the burn day comes, and I got to spend 2 hours cleaning leaves out of the fire break, or maybe a bunch of trees fell down in a windstorm or something, and and I missed that window because the site's not how I left it. So think about that. All right. So there's your preparation planning and your burn plan written. Now it's time for burn day. And so we'll talk about some of the management, right? So you're gonna be a burn boss. You're gonna manage the prescribed burn, and how I go about it and how we went about it for this unit. So managing RX burn effectively and executing a plan to achieve your goals safely can be broken down into bite-sized steps. Some of the steps is pre-burn preparations, ignition and holding, mop up, patrol and monitoring, meeting objectives, and post-burn evaluation. Okay, pre-burn prep. So burn day's here, and there's a lot of work still to be done before you can put fire on the ground. Here are some of the main steps we take to ensure a safe and successful burn. Make sure your burn kit is in order. A checklist is really good for this. Just, go ahead and make it up, everything you're going to need, and check it off every day. And don't forget your burn plan, maps, spot weather forecasts for the next couple days, weather monitoring devices, and smoke signs for nearby roadways. Make sure your incoming resources and contingency resources know what equipment, PPE, and tools they're expected to bring with them, and discuss logistics beforehand. Right? You don't want to be sitting out there at 9 a.m. and everybody's showing up at noon. Make all required pre-burn notifications that are necessary for the day of the burn and again before your test burn. So you want to call all those agencies and 911 and everybody and let them know as early as possible, hey, you're going to be doing a burn in the area, so the VFDs don't show up and try to put it out because you didn't let them know. Get to the site as early as possible and begin monitoring local weather and fuel moisture and compare to the predicted weather as the morning progresses. Monitoring the weather trends is going to help you determine more precisely when you should begin a test burn and ignition. So, like I said, that local weather is going to probably be different than what's predicted. And if you're watching that and you're watching the trends as your RHs go down, and your fuel moisture start to lower and your dews coming off the ground, you're going to know when to start, when's a good time to get going early. Do a thorough site evaluation to make sure that the burn plan is accurate, the control lines are still intact, and there are no issues that have gone unaddressed. So, like I said, get back out there. You might know this area like the back of your hand, especially if it's your property. Ride around it, walk around it, make sure everything's the way you left it, and it's all ready to go, and you hadn't missed anything. As people are showing up, brief your resources on every detail of the burn plan. Do not skip anything that you think they don't really need to know about, as long as you know, because that's not true. Provide them a map. Make sure they understand the operational procedures and what role that they're going to play in the operation. Include the logistics, the hazards, the critical holding concerns, the current and predicted weather, and what to do in case of an injury or a spot over or escaped fire. Make sure communications are understood and do a radio check in different areas, especially if you got some rough topography. Make sure the communications are going to go smoothly beforehand. Brief your resources thoroughly on planned ignition sequences, methods being used for ignition, expected fire behavior, and take the time to answer any questions. Just keep in mind a lot of people may assume that they know things and they really don't understand them. So take the time to answer questions and be really thorough about what's planned for that day to everyone. So go, no go. This is the last time you're going to ask yourself, is this burn within the parameters? Is everything ready? What's the chance of success here? And there's a checklist that we use for that. So once the crew is briefed is when I usually finalize the go, no go checklist and make sure I have everything in place and conditions are met. If conditions are not met, then you need to mitigate or resolve it and document any changes in your burn plan. Don't forget to get a burn permit. Let's go back to this and I'll show you our go, no go checklist here. All right. So some of the general questions is, make sure that you've contacted everyone that needs to be contacted. Everybody's briefed. Are your lines good? Are you within prescription? And what do you think your smoke's going to do? And is it going to affect people negatively? All important stuff. So have some kind of checklist if you don't use this one, and make sure you go through it, because you'll often forget stuff if not. All right, now we're ready for the test fire. So everybody's here. Everybody's been briefed. Your go no go checklist is good. You're within your parameters, and we want to see, when we put fire on the ground, what's actually going to happen, and what we can expect, and is it going to meet the objectives. So always conduct a test fire on a small portion of the unit you're burning prior to any ignition sequence, and a small portion of a unit depends on the size of the unit and the different fuel types. So if you got a unit that's half hardwood and then half pine, you're gonna see different fire activity in those different fuels. So you might do a test burn in each of those. It might be an acre. It might be 20 acres, depending on the size of the unit and what you want to see. If the unit has mixed fuels and topography features, try to incorporate a mix in your test burn. Like I said, do not light an unsafe or overly aggressive test burn that has the potential to spread beyond your ability to contain it. Keep in mind, it is a test burn, and you need to be able to put it out if it's not going the way you want. Document the fire behavior, flame lengths, smoke production, direction, dispersion, and fuel consumption in your burn plan. Compare these to the objectives and parameters, and evaluate if you can meet objectives while ensuring firefighter and public safety. So let's go back again. So here's the test fire documentation that we use in our burn plan, and we'll put the time, the temperature, relative humidity, wind speeds, direction, and then you're going to record what you're seeing, right? Flame lengths for your backing, flanking, and head fire, which you want to try to incorporate all of those. And then your smoke conditions, how much smoke you're producing, the direction, and the dispersion, and record that. And down below that, you see weather observations. So you definitely want to keep up with your prescription throughout the day, and make sure that you're not dropping out of that as the day goes on. Just keep some kind of records of all that with you. All right, now we're getting in ignitions. So once you decided that your test burn's going good, you can meet objectives, everything's safe, you should begin ignitions using the techniques outlined in the burn plan. This is based on many factors and can and will change due to the fluid environment within and around the unit. With more experience, you'll learn to anticipate and quickly adapt to changes in the environment as you conduct your burn. Burn objectives, tree planting, site prep was this one. So pretty straightforward. We want to burn everything, right? There's nothing there we got to worry about it getting too intense on for this one. So that's nice. Fuel characteristics, 1 in 10 hour pre-treated sprayed fuels with jackpot piles and consistent slash throughout. That's also something to consider. Weather, temperature, moderately low RHs, consistent 10-mile-an-hour winds. So that day was a hot, high temp, relatively low RH day for September, for mid-September, and 10-mile-an-hour winds on a site prep burn like this, and in an open area with direct sun is pretty can get pretty hot. So smoke management guidelines, we had an unstable atmosphere So our smoke was pulling out pretty good, even though the wind was kind of laying it down a little. It was still lifting up and out long term. And then of course we had the power lines there, so we wanted to make sure if we had any shifting smokes that we were ready for that. Available staffing, equipment, and resources. We had two experienced ignition and holding crews. Keyword is experience there, and a lookout and somebody to watch the weather at a good vantage point the whole time we were burning this area. Um, so, like I said, we planned to ring this unit, but as we got into it and we saw what the fire was doing, and we also had some wildlife issues there, and so we kind of switched up our tactics here, and we went for like a stripping technique, where it was a little rougher. There were some briars and stuff, but we just had a couple guys just go and just strip across the unit, maybe 30 feet, 30 feet, 30 feet, and it kept our intensity down and also helped pull our smoke in and up and lift it straight out, like you can see here, instead of really laying over. So when those fires come together in that heat, it's gonna pull that smoke up and out a lot better. So those are just some of the things to consider. You can always adjust your tactics after you see what your fire and smoke's doing, to keep the intensity at a manageable level and your smoke. So for holding, the resources assigned to holding will work to make sure the fire stays within the control lines and communicate any needs or concerns as the fire burns along the fire break. I always tell crews to, if there is an issue, the sooner the better, communicate it to the burn boss. Holding crews should be spaced out along the actively burning fire's edge and trailing the ignition crew. Utilizing ATVs or UTVs to quickly patrol sections of line is a great tool, especially if they can carry water. These resources that are using UTVs should be trained in the vehicle they're using and take care to drive slower in smoky conditions to prevent an accident. Spot fires outside of control lines should be immediately communicated to the burn boss and suppressed. If additional resources are needed for a spot fire, then they should communicate that as needed. So make sure you let people know, if they got a spot over in the holding crew, um, if they think it's just minor, communicate that. Give them a few minutes there to get it under control. If it starts to get out of hand, make sure they're letting you know as soon as possible. When you're patrolling in vehicles, keep in mind of the smoke. Like I said, we use a lot of dozers and UTVs. Keep those lights on. Make sure that if you're holding crew or walking around in those dozer lines or whatever, that they got some kind of headlamp or something on, because often you can't see people. Somebody could get hurt that way. All right, let's go on to mop up and patrol. Use the mop up standards in the burn plan that we talked about earlier. Once ignitions are complete, start wrapping up the burn. Mop up can consist of many different techniques and requirements based on fuels, predicted weather, or other factors. So mop up using hand tools, equipment, water, or reigniting interior islands to consume remaining fuel. Flashy fuels and fine fuels may require a lot less mop up than 100 or 1,000-hour fuels, big logs that are burning near the control lines. You're going to have to do a little more work to get those interior and away from the control lines. And grasses are, for the most part, once grasses are consumed, it's done, and you're pretty good there. Often crews are fatigued, complacent, or in a rush to finish mop up, and can have accidents or overlook a hot spot or burning snag. Keep that in mind. You work all day. These guys work all day, and they might miss something, or they might have a hot date later, and they just want to get out of there. So double check, make sure everything's good. Assign resources to patrol unit until the RH starts to recover and temperatures begin to fall. It's also to take a ride down the road and see what kind of smoke is going to be settling in overnight. If there are any concerns, you guys have seen smoked in areas, or smoke's kind of like water at night when it cools off, and it's just going to go, uh, down in the valleys and in the lowest spots and follow the topo down. So revisit the site the next day to ensure containment and continue mop up if needed. It's also a good idea to visit the next afternoon during hotter, drier conditions to make sure nothing is reignited. So you come back first thing in the morning and it might look all good, but make sure you come back that next afternoon, 1 or 2 o'clock, and make sure nothing else kicked back up. All right, so evaluating the burn. Before resources are released, it's a good time to do a post-burn out briefing. We conduct what's called an after-action review. The following day, you should return to the site and complete documentation in your burn plan. Check for any control or smoke issues and begin to study the effects of the burn and continue evaluating if objectives were met. An after action review consists of 4 questions. What was planned? What actually happened? Why did it happen? And what can we do next time? Even if, you're just 1 or 2 guys out there burning on your property, it's a good idea to consider this, and you can always improve next time. So document that, and then use it as a tool to preserve strengths and correct weaknesses in the future. Document in your burn plan how your results compared to the measurable objectives and what factors contributed to the outcome of the burn. So we think about our objectives there were, I think, to reduce 75% of the 1 in 10 hour fuels, and a certain amount of the logging slash, and that's the kind of things that you want to put a number on, and that way you can measure the success of that burn. And then over, the next couple of years, we've been back to that site and looked at the tree planting, and we're going to keep evaluating and see how it went. All right. So that's it. I put a link here for the where to get a burn permit, the prescribed fire website for and the toolkit there, and then my email. So if anybody ever wants to email me, they have questions or just want to send me some cool pictures or something, that's my email there. And so if anybody has any questions, then I will take those now.
Yeah. So Travis, if you'll do me a favor, because we're kind of really crunching time right now. Murray's probably says that he's got a 20-30 minute presentation. So if you don't mind to just peruse the chat and see if there were any questions on the chat. I thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending the time putting this together and sharing with everyone. If anybody does have any questions for Travis, please feel free to put those in the chat. Additionally, Travis, if you don't mind putting your email maybe in the chat, that way people can snatch that from there, and then send you questions. That would be great.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll do that. And yep. And I think somebody mentioned the slides. I can email those to you, Troy. So, all right. Thank you, Jackie.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. All right, so next up we have Murray. Murray, if you want to take control of Microsoft Teams and upload your slideshow. I've worked with Murray a few times. He is a stewardship ecologist for the Tennessee Division of Natural Areas. And he's been working on many different projects throughout Cumberland Plateau and the Highland Rim. He's going to give a great presentation today about a project he's worked on in the Cedar Glades area. Murray, if you want to take it away, and we'll just let you wow us with your presentation. You might have to unmute yourself, Murray, and it looks like I'm just seeing your screen right now.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear
Jackie?
you just fine.
All right. How about now? Can you see the title screen now?
I do not. I still see just your Microsoft Teams screen.
Okay. Sorry, just a moment. Mhm. Okay. How about now? Do you see the title screen now, Jackie?
I see your whole entire PowerPoint with the notes and the slides on the side and everything.
Yeah, okay. All right. How about now?
Nope. You might have to click a button that might say, you might drag and drop if you're using two different screens, maybe.
Okay. Let's see.
Perfect.
Okay.
That
So
looks
you see
great.
the title screen without notes?
Yep, it looks great.
Okay, great. Okay. All right. So yes, I work for Division of Natural Areas, and a little bit about Division of Natural Areas. We usually, a site is usually designated as a state natural area because of some rare plant species, rare plant community, or rare ecosystem type. We do a lot of prescribed fire and wildlife and tree mortality are certain considerations in our prescribed fire planning, but it is a little bit different in that we're just managing for these rare ecosystem types or plant communities. And specifically, I'll be talking about the Cedar Glades ecosystem of the Central Basin of Tennessee. And although the concepts related to prescribed fire can be translated to other systems, and the title. So, rethinking fire intervals using qualitative picture guides. Does it sound like a research paper? Well, that's because it was developed from a research paper by Sam King, the Natural Areas Program Administrator, who authored this for his thesis work. And although I'm presenting just solely his work, Sam and I work closely together discussing and designing and implementing management on state natural areas, specifically Cedar Glades for many years. So what is a glade? The common definition in ecology is a forest opening existing because of a rocky outcrop that prevents woody plants from encroaching and becoming dominant. And they're really a grasslands system. So they're globally rare and of extremely high conservation value. And they're a system that exists because of fire and suffer from lack of fire. They're home to a diverse number of specialized species. And although the glade definition addresses only the rocky outcrop, we generally refer to cedar glades in a broader sense. In Tennessee, many of the designated state natural areas contain the phrase cedar glades and barrens in the name. So beyond the gravelly rock, the soil increases to a depth that hosts annual and then perennial grasses, then shrubs, and they are ringed by eastern red cedar and other fire tolerant or fire loving hardwoods such as post oak. They can range in size from big areas like this to just pockets of a few meters hanging on within encroaching trees or a closed canopy. The specialized plants in cedar glades evolved to endure the harsh conditions. Glades are extremely hot and dry in the summer and often saturated with water in the winter. So these are poor growing conditions, and these plants have evolved to adapt to that. Just these photos here, Tennessee coneflower was among the first federally listed endangered plants, and it was delisted in 2011 from conservation efforts to secure the population enough to remove it from the endangered species list. Next is the national breadroot and a prickly pear, Tennessee's only native cactus. But even more rare than those specialized plants are some others. These are federally listed. Pine's ground plum on the left there, that's a reintroduction site. What you can see the cage that surrounds it to protect from predation. And each one of these plants has a tag and with a number associated to it. And on the right is leafy prairie clover. Both of these are glade endemic plants. Okay, so the goal of Sam's paper was to take published ecological concepts and translate them into a pictorial guide for informing management about appropriate fire return intervals. And so given the decline of grasslands, not just in the Southeast, but globally, the importance of biodiversity preservation through active management is really important. So this is an example of the published research that Sam's trying to kind of distill. This is the Baskin flow chart, and it addresses plant succession in glades. It's very complex. It's hard to wrap your head around even after multiple readings, and it minimizes the role of fire in the system, basically because it's focused on the succession. So Sam simplified the flow chart, but kept the same material. It still illustrates plant succession in glade zones from open exposed bedrock or gravel with no soil to the mixed hardwood forest that develops in the absence of disturbances or fire. This is how the soil formation and accumulation leads to plant community changes in glades over time. The focus is still on community succession and not management. So still fires is not a main element, but graphically it's represented in here. So starting at the top left, we'll go through what these zones actually look like in glades. So this is the exposed bedrock outcrop to gravelly glade transition. You see in the photo on the left, in the background is just the bedrock, and that's a killdeer, which they nest, and they like to nest in these gravelly areas as their eggs are perfectly camouflaged by the gravel. And the picture to the right is limestone fameflower, which is one of the few plants that can exist in this really lack of soil, gravelly bedrock area. All right, so weathering cracks in the bedrock, sediment and cyanobacteria begin to collect. They form a gravelly glade, and with a slight amount of soil, enough for some annual grasses and succulents. Here is weathering represented through the surface water and a sedum, a last year's sedum anyway, that can tolerate it. Moving on to the cyanobacteria on the left there, that's witch's butter, which is really common to see in these glade areas. When it's slightly more wet, it looks really slimy. And the picture on the right represents kind of a gravel glade transition into a grassy glade with Phlox bifida stellaria showing there in that region or zone. On continuing weathering, a collection of organic litter, so that would be like red cedar cast off or leaf accumulation. Soil formation allows for development of a grassy glade. Again, a transition between gravel and the grassy glade with prickly pear. Okay, moving on. In the absence of disturbance, shrubs and eastern red cedar begin to colonize with adequate soil formation. So here we've got a little bit deeper soil. There's the grasses and Tennessee coneflower in the picture on the left, some red cedar in the background, some sunny bells, which will tolerate or need more of a moist soil to sustain their population. So deeper soil and edged by a closed canopy there. And this photo shows a good zone representation of the deep grasses, and then you can see a definite shrub layer followed by trees, a closed canopy. Woody plant succession continues towards a red cedar dominated forest. And I like this photo because it shows kind of the whole picture, from bedrock to gravelly glade to grass, and enough soil for trees to be sustain themselves in islands anyway. And it's all bordered by kind of the closed canopy forest. But moving back up and to the left, with disturbances such as fires, woody succession is kept to a minimum, and a xeric limestone prairie develops. Some woody plants persist in the transition zones. Yeah, this is some photos of fire representing or moving through transition zones. You've got the trees and grass zone, and back in the picture on the right is fire running through that transition zone between grass and trees again. This is post-burn. Our goal in these glade areas is a mosaic. So, we're not concentrating on 100% black, but like to see this mix of burned and unburned areas. It provides a refuge for wildlife, and plant phenology is always a consideration in burn plans. So if we're on a margin for plant phenology, say we're at the end of some reproductive cycle for a plant, this provides some refuge for plants as well as animals. So using the same information from the flow chart, graphics like this can provide a different perspective of succession and can be helpful in determining the need for disturbance. So the grassy or gravel glades form on weathered material, and then areas with more soil can facilitate the process of plant succession, which is illustrated on the right half of this graphic. Encroachment is what happens when the disturbances like fire are removed from glade systems. So because glades require periodic disturbance to remain open, encroachment lowers their overall diversity. This illustrates the kind of reach by woody species into the open areas that propel the encroachment. Illustrating the encroachment concept, this is the absence of disturbance. You've got the eastern red cedar encroachment illustrated in the middle there, moving into kind of the grassy and gravelly glades. And normal areas that would support a dry limestone prairie are invaded first by shrubs and then red cedars. So how can fires be used to manage glades for the maximum diversity? And there's four answers to this. You can manipulate vegetation structure. You can reduce the woody encroachment and increase light at the soil surface. These are some photos illustrating fire used on the margins, on the zones, transition zones for glade areas. The one on the left, you see some red cedar being affected by fire, and the one on the right providing more sunlight hitting the ground. Fire consumes the organic material that would break down into soil. This is the same photo of fire transitioning through a zone. You can see the grass there on the right that would break down into and accumulate into soil. But fire consumes it instead. And we can minimize competition for resources by preventing plant succession. So on the backgrounds here, fire was used, and you can see that the shrub layer was kind of halted there. It reduces the succession and competition, and also allows more light. You can maintain the ecotones between distinct glade zones to maximize habitat heterogeneity. And that is just simply maintaining the edges of these zones. You can use fire to manipulate the vegetation structure, set back the plant succession. So we know fires set back the plant succession, but fires can also maintain and shift those edges, allowing the zones to expand. And these cartoons give a rough depiction of current states, then show what a desired state could be if burned. Fire consuming smaller red cedar that does not resprout can lower the fire. The red cedar does not resprout, though you have lower fire effects into that shrub and canopy layer. And it set back succession, but you're not talking about a mortality of these larger shrubs and trees. For glades separated by successional woody species, the edges or ecotone expansion can allow for connections between previously isolated glades, and that connection allows for better gene flow among species. It increases the richness of the specialist species and other species that thrive in the diverse, intact natural plant communities, provides pollinator food and diversity that would disappear in woody succession. Ideally, these rock and gravel zones exist within a matrix of annual grasses and perennial grasses. The photo here is from Couchville State Natural Area. It shows how the connectivity between gravel glades should look with interspersed cedar and fire-loving hardwoods like post oak. And although these photos are taken in 2 different seasons, they illustrate how fire can expand connectivity and reduce encroachment. So the red cedar mortality is evident on the one on the right. Perennial grasses have recruited into the site, and the glade edges have more light availability. Note the mature cedar on the left remains unharmed, and showing that it's really just the early successional cedar that's most easily managed by fire. So, recommendations for using prescribed fire in glades. Specific site conditions can drastically alter the need for fire. So they should each be individually evaluated. But the strict timing of, we burn fall every 2 years is not necessary when you're evaluating each site for its composition. Again, this is the mosaic that we're looking for. And fire creates a feedback loop in these systems where grasses carry fire and fire promotes grasses. So the periodic burning, not only is our glades dependent on it, it's a good management technique for expanding the habitat. In summary, know your objective and what your ideal structure looks like. Increasing weather volatility will impact your fire timing. So drought can set back succession. So you can adjust your fire interval based on observations. If you have a drought that's set back succession, you might not need to burn every 2 years. You can move it back and maybe hit it once every 5. But the idea is that you're not constrained to a once every 5. You're evaluating at least annually, but seasonally would be better. While prescribed fires may be the best tool for glades, in many cases, the restrictions could prevent its use, like city or municipal concerns, archaeological resources, or whatever human factors that preclude your fire. In these cases, mechanical or chemical treatments can be used, and anything is better than nothing in these fire adapted systems. And that's all I've got. I'll be glad to take some questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Murray. That was awesome. If anybody has any questions for Murray, please feel free to put them in the chat. Murray, if you don't mind putting your email in the chat, maybe people will reach out to you with further questions. Looks like Haley might have a question and or comment. She says, a little off topic, but it sounds like you're the guy to ask. When managing to restore savanna ecosystems, do you protect the saplings? Is that a few years down the road from the first burn, or should small hardwoods 1 to 2 feet tall be protected from the start?
Yeah, it depends on where you are currently. If you're transitioning to a savanna, your burns are going to typically be more frequent, and then you can start to back off your fire interval as you begin to see what you want to see. So yeah, the answer, like almost everything in life, is it depends, right?
Yeah, and that's something going back to Haley was in our Tennessee Certified Burn Manager course over the past week, and it goes back to talking about what your objectives are and what you're really trying to do with your burn. Everybody's objectives are different. If there are specific species that you're wanting to maintain, do your research, do a literature review of those different species, the fire ecology, help yourself out to figure out what tools and tricks of the trade that you can use. So thanks for the question, Haley. I did put on the screen, y'all. I am currently sharing the QR code. If you are a Tennessee Certified Burn Manager and are looking for points, please feel free to use your Smart Pants phone. Click on try to take a picture of that QR code. There should be a link that pops up when you're aiming your camera at the screen. Please feel free to sign in there and fill out that form to let me know that you need Tennessee Certified Burn Manager points. In just a few minutes, I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to get that. I am also going to then put up a QR code for you SAF foresters who would also like continued education credits. So just hang on a couple of minutes for those foresters out there who would like SAF points. So Stony Logan said, interesting subject. I never thought of an area like that, although I've seen areas like that in Eastern Sierras. One of the things that I'm hoping to do in the future related to the Tennessee Certified Burn Manager course is invite all of the Tennessee agencies, sister agencies, and those doing prescribed fires, conducting prescribed fires and research in Tennessee to share their knowledge and experience, not only with the up and coming Tennessee Certified Burn Managers, but also with, previous and current certified burn managers, and as well as the public. So Murray, thank you for coming. Clint, thank you. Travis, thank you. Those of you out there who work for one of the Tennessee agencies and/or researchers or practitioners who are out there, if you think you are a candidate to share your information and help us out with guiding our certified burn managers and prescribed fire practitioners, tricks of the trade, something to add to all of our tool belts, please feel free to reach out to me. I look forward to providing these opportunities in the future. Those of you who don't know what your certified burn manager number is, please just leave that vacant. I will have to do some sleuthing. Encouragement in the future, though. I will try to reach out to you and provide you with your certified burn manager number by email. Please keep track of that. That's very important, right? Because to fall under the law, the liability blanket of the Prescribed Fire Act, which says basically you have to have a burn plan, you have to take the Tennessee Certified Burn Manager course, you need to keep that up to date, blah, blah, blah. You have to know your number, okay? So once I email that to you, try to keep track on that. Anyone interested in establishing an association for landowners for RX? Lou, that's a really great question and a good place to ask that question. Lou, if you want to provide your contact information, your email, you can put that in the chat. And those of you who do know your number, fill it out on the form. Providing your number in the chat for me doesn't help. So again, on your screen, you should see a QR code that you can scan with your phone and fill out that form. If the form is not working for you, please email me. I'm going to put my email in the chat so that you all can communicate with me. All right, and I am now going to switch those QR codes, those foresters out there who want to receive SAF points, stand by, and I'm going to switch those. Give me 1 second here. T responses, QR code. All right. All right, I'm going to switch over to the SAF points, everyone. Stand by. This is for the SAF CFEs. And that will conclude our day today. So again, thank you to all the presenters. You all did an amazing job. Thank you for braving it out. If you haven't presented before, it looks like all of you have. So congratulations and thank you so much. Remember everyone, their emails are in the chat so you can reach out them to directly and look forward to providing you with information in the future by email on how you guys can attend other webinars like this and other programs offered like this. So I'm going to stop recording for today, and thanks everyone for attending. Meeting is coming to a close.